but mostly my recollections of Smoky are mostly doing TVs and doing doing the voiceovers with Bob Cottle. Sometimes we would do almost 4 tapes in one night. And to try to go back in those hills of Virginia and West Virginia and do 3 tapes or 3 hours of TV wrestling, actually it was very, very taxing to get that done and to sit there. And I never went to a voiceover session with Bob Caudle. I mean, we were never called to Knoxville to a studio to voice over anything. If it wasn't done that night, it didn't get done. So we had one shot at it, and it was live. And of course, Jimmy took it back to the studio, and he tinkered with he would edit this out or edit this out. But I don't think that much was edited out of that show. From what I saw when I was sitting at the table and then watching it back, not a lot of editing was done on that show. I mean, as far as taking commentary out, and probably not a lot of taking just the actual wrestling footage out. It was what it was, and we put it together. It was as old school as it could get. You got what you got, and let's run with it.
As somebody with my co-host who has watched all 200 episodes of Smokey and the early stuff, obviously with you and Bob, I can say, you can tell usually when a match is kind of cut, and you can tell when there are edits made because, guys will end up in a different spot in the ring. Even if it's just a second, you can tell. I can tell you, yeah, unless it was like the big shows, the Volunteer Slam or things like that, the, weekly TVs where you did the 3 to 4 tapings, you're absolutely right. Basically, whatever was put out there was what was put out there, and what you and Bob did. And you're right, you and Bob did a great job on commentary. I mean, you were the perfect yin to his yang, I guess is the word I'm looking for. You were the perfect spoil to him as you mess with Bob Cottle all the time. How was it working with Bob?
Oh, it was great. Bob was a great straight commentator. Yes. And I think what made us work is we never bickered. I would hold those signs up, and then Bob would say, "What was in that sign, Dutch?" And I'd say, "Nothing you'd be interested in, Bob," or something. And he always pretended not to know what the signs read, and he never alluded to them at all, which I think added to it. And I even took that. The sign gimmick, I even took it to WWE with me because I thought the sign gimmick was better than doing a promo. You could put on that sign, and they'll read the sign. And I'm a strong believer in let the fans decide what it means. I mean, you've heard of commentators say, "Well, this means this and this means that." I mean, these fans aren't stupid. And they can put their own meaning to anything. But I started doing those signs, and it took off. People liked it. It would be a stupid sign. One time I held a sign upside down. Yeah. And nobody ever told me I had the sign held upside down. So, people stopped the tape to back it up and then turn their head sideways to see what the sign said. And when I held the sign upside down, I didn't even know I had it upside down. And nobody told me, and we just hit run exactly like that. I mean, Smoky Mountain was just pure off the cuff. Hey, what was that? What was that? A series or whatever that WWE had? It was like a small Southern promotion, and it was like a. You know what I'm talking about?
Southpaw Regional Wrestling with the clips. Yeah.
I never saw that. Was that any good?
Well, it mocked basically Memphis, Smoky, Mid-South. It mocked all the great Southern territories. It's let
me say this. When they were mocking those Southern territories, because this is what and now you're from down south, right?
Oh, I'm from the deep South, New Orleans, Louisiana.
Well, there is a thing called. I call it geographical elitism. Because if you go up north and you have a Southern accent, I mean, they immediately They judge you by that. And I think, especially New York and Vince, they judge Southern wrestling as being hick and really slow and backward, but they copy everything that Memphis did. Everything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let me say, well, that's that stupid Memphis stuff. And let them get to a point where they need something to boost a pay-per-view. And they weren't hesitant to steal anything that Memphis had done. And without apology too. I mean, they would just take it. So to me, that told me, well, they'll knock it because they think they're better than what we did down south. People used to ask me, especially about Memphis wrestling, why did y'all do all those crazy angles? And why did you fight out in the crowd? And I said, because we goddamn needed to eat next week. That's why we did it. I mean, we were in these towns 52 weeks a year. We was in Memphis 52 Mondays in a row. And we may have missed a Monday every now and then. But when you go to a town over and over and over and over, not only do you got to give them a show on Monday night, you got to give them a trailer for next week. And then you got to do a TV and then continue that, then go back in there. Have a couple of bad shows and your house falls off to nothing. Now, see, you can do that in New York. How often did they run New York back in the old days? Every 6 weeks? That's how often they would run Madison Square Garden, every 6 weeks. They wouldn't run it every week. I guarantee you, if you had WWF go into Madison Square Garden on a Monday night and have a show, and then come back the next Monday, let's say they draw 20,000 people. If they come back the next Monday, it'll be about 12,000. They come back the next Monday, they're down to 7,000. So it would probably bottom out at about 4,000 people. Because I've been in the Garden with about 4,000 people in there. And believe me, you could shoot a shotgun off in that place in the middle of the ring and not hit anybody. So that's why we did. And I tell you when that was, when they brought in the Goon and they brought in, you remember that period in WWE?
Yeah, I'm about to tell you, the Goon, T.L. Hopper, yep.
Right. And they brought all those guys in, put them on the show, and it just bombed. And I'm gonna say right now, what's wrong with WWE is how the old Southern territories used to operate, because we always told a story. We had a story that had a definite beginning. Then you had the middle part where the conflict was, and then you had a resolution to it, or a seeming resolution to it that wasn't the resolution, and then we went on down, and then we would go back and join it again. That's why we had to make things last in these Southern territories, like Smoky Mountain, like Memphis, like Mid-South, like Florida, because you only had a set number of guys. If you really look at what WWE has now, they got like, on the main roster, they got like 70 guys, 70 talents. Now, you cannot use 70 talents on a show. You just can't do it. I think the most you could probably use is 20 or 22, and that's a lot. But I don't know how you keep, and there is a thing too, having too many stories. But WWE, to me, right now, and I don't even watch it hardly anymore, they have no stories that interest me, and that's the problem. But they don't know. I don't think even Vince knows how to fix it. He knows the problems, but I think Vince is torn in so many ways. Plus, he's 74 years old. He's probably tired, and he tried to get Heyman and Pritchard to come in to help him, and it didn't work out too well for Paul, because I think Paul had a definite plan what he wanted to do, and Vince didn't like it, so he said, all right, well, we'll get somebody else. This business is not as simple as what it looks sometimes, but it is simple. It's a simple story that you got to carry out, and that's what Smoky Mountain did well. That's what Memphis did well. That's what Mid-South did well. They had stories, and the people knew what the story was about and how they wanted it to end.
I completely agree. There's I want to ask you one more question about the signs, and then I'm going to go to one of the angles in Smoky that I kind of that is will emphasize what you just explained clearly. You were talking about, but real quick, you were starting to talk, and we were talking about the signs for a minute with you and Bob, and that started around episode 30, maybe 40 of Smoky, where you were messing with Bob, where you were writing the signs to start the shows. Cornette, I asked him about this when he came on. I said, what did you think of the signs? And he kind of said some of what you just said. He's like, Dutch and Bob are going through these marathon TV tapings, 3 and 4 shows that we're doing. So, 4 hours in this little town. He's like, I think Dutch at first just did it to kind of entertain himself to start things off. Now, you kind of did say, it was a joke and kind of having some fun, and obviously it was your idea. Bob seemed to be a really good sport about the signs and what you were writing, even though they made fun of him. So if I heard you right, with those signs, he knew what was on them, but he sold it as if he didn't, which was great. Honestly, Dutch, it was a great little snarky, funny way to kick off the shows, where it made you look like the heel that you were, and Bob Cottle was sympathetic because he's the straight man trying to call this, and here you are, being a clown and a buffoon.
Well, he knew what some of them said.
Okay.
I don't think he knew what all of them said. I don't think he cared, to tell you the truth. He knew it would be something that wouldn't. The only one that I ever had that, and I would make fun of Bob. I said, yes, that is Bob's real hair, whatever. Then I might say, don't adjust your set. It's just Bob or something like that. But yeah, and I did it just and I would go up there and I'd have them bring me. I'd tell the production guy up there, I said, hey, have me about 4 or 5, poster boards, and I would make them up before the show, and I'd take it out there. And he always never, and that's why I said that's what made Bob so good, is because we never argued, we never bickered. Bob would sometimes he just tolerated me. I remember he said one time, well, that's easy for you to say. How can you say that? I said, well, I don't know. I just say one word, and then I put another word next to that one, and I put another one, and then it comes out. I don't know. How do you do it, Bob? And I had a great time, because I love Bob Cottle. He's one of the easiest guys in the world to work with. Nothing phases him. He just sits there, and if a bomb blew up out there, he said, well, what was that? And we just continued to go on. But I always thought Bob was always like, to me, even when I was kind of growing up and listening to him in Mid-Atlantic, he's a perfect announcer. He was,
Yeah.
he didn't get overly excited. He just called the action, which is one thing I think that WWE commentators need to do, but they can't because of the system in WWE. And I know this is about Smoky Mountain, but if you really look at the commentators, kind of, to me, I listen to them because those are the guys that you're hearing the most of on that show. If it's a 42-minute show, if you take out for interviews, it's really 30 minutes of hearing most of those commentators. You hear them the most. So they got to not only tell the story, but kind of lay out when it's time to lay out, and then hop on it when it's hot. WWE, they don't do that. They're too busy pushing merch and pushing something on the network and doing something else, and some special coming up on the network, and the match. I don't care. Sometimes the match takes second place, but I think in Smoky Mountain, I think it was a good mix. That we talked about the in-ring action, what was coming up, and we talked wrestling for an hour. The show was an hour, right? Smoky Mountain. I don't even remember now. It's an hour show, correct?
Yeah, well, 1 hour minus local promos and commercials.
So it adds up to really, and people never think of this, but really an hour show on TV really equals 42 minutes of actual content.
Right.
That's what Jimmy was obliged to provide on that show. because, the TV, they had their spots, and we're going to take this and this and this. We'll give you guys 42 minutes to get your stuff in. And that's what we ran with. So, and I forgot what the original question was, but that's my answer.
Well, no, I was just pointing out how Bob Cottle, you and Bob Cottle, and Dutch, I'm not just saying this. I've said this I'm not just saying this because I'm talking to you now. Finally, I've said this for the entire run that you had with Bob as his color guy, color commentator. You and Bob are a very underrated commentary team because Bob Cottle is the perfect, in your own words, he's like the perfect straight guy. He doesn't, like, nothing rattles him. He kind of just calls what he's seeing in the ring. And then you would just do your thing that only Dutch Mantell can do. And I mean that sincerely, where, and I'll give you an example. There was an episode of Early Smoky where Robert Gibson is in the ring and you and Bob are on commentary, and Bob's, he's calling the match, all right, Gibson hip toss. He went for an arm drag there, and all right, he's got him in an arm lock or whatever. And then you tell Bob, did you hear about Robert Gibson's last album? It went sheetrock. And Bob Cottle is not ready for it. Bob Cottle pops. He can't contain himself, Dutch. It's hilarious. He's trying with all his might, you can tell, but he kind of chuckles and then he gets back to it. But it's that little interplay where, Bob is the perfect straight guy to your just debauchery at times, where you're just making fun of things. And the example you also gave where Bob's like, well, Dutch, how do you say that? How do you come up with that? And you're like, well, I just take one word and I put it after that word and then I put another word after that. That's what I'm talking about. You guys had the perfect chemistry. You guys were the perfect tandem in Smoky, and that's including Jim Ross and Les Thatcher, who were great. You and Bob were perfect. You were perfect together. And again, I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to you.
Well, I appreciate that, and I did think we were good because it was easy. When something is easy, it's a natural fit. And I never felt pressure with Bob. I don't think Bob felt pressure with me. And because I have seen announced partners go out there and try to outdo each other. I remember one time in WCW, they had Paul Heyman out there with Jim Ross. They literally almost got into a verbal match on TV trying to outdo each other. Do you remember what I'm talking about? It was Heyman was just starting out, and he was trying to be the fun as New Yorker, and I think he really irritated Jim on this program, and it kind of settled down after that because I don't know who got them together and told them to stop it, but it was actually distracting from the show. Bob and we would talk about the match. And if we threw a few gems in, and I had forgotten saying that you hear about his latest album, it was Sheetrock. I had forgotten about that. Actually, I laughed about it when I heard it because I'd forgotten I'd said it. But it was things like that. And if you listen for that, I bet the people at home said, what did he say? But back in those days, you couldn't back the tape up. You either heard it or you'd have to either tape it and go back and listen to it. But there was no stop the tape, back it up, what did he say? And I think that was one of the beauties of Smoky Mountain. So I really enjoyed my time with Bob.